And we're live, guys. We're live. This is Pops here tonight. Who we got with us? Anybody standing by yet already? Looks like we got some people in here hanging out waiting for this huge event. Here I am up on USS Never Sail. Rita Gamer is here. Rita, how are you? Tushan's here. AMC Jeep is here. Let's get some of these greetings in. Are you guys half as excited as I am? Dewey 96 with the follow. Arriving. I knew that bell was in there somewhere. Awesome, guys. How's everyone doing? I don't want to keep Papa Fodder waiting too long. He's kind of nervous tonight. I don't know. He's afraid I'm going to ask him something crazy. Tushan, yeah, man. Haircut, man. How's it look? High and tight. High and tight. I'm telling you. Let me get my hat on straight again. Dewey, what's up, man? Dewey 96. All right, guys, without further ado, we're going to bring up our guest for tonight, who has graciously agreed to come into Pop's Fireside chat tonight and let us ask him some questions and get to know him a little bit better up close and personal. And without any further ado, I want to introduce you to our very own Papa Fodder. Woohoo! Papa.
Hey, yo.
Awesome, dude. Awesome. How are you doing? Red shirt.
I'm fantastic. Yeah. The Blackbeards. I don't know if you guys can see that little manic on it, but there's a nice seafood restaurant there on the Gulf Coast in Southeast Texas. So
awesome. And just for your own satisfaction, when you look, go ahead and look in one direction. Just look left or right, whichever way you want to look. That's the wrong way, okay? I'm over on the other side of the screen, man. That's the wrong way.
I always do that. It doesn't matter if you give me a reference, I'm going to do it wrong.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Oh, man. What was your day like today? What'd you do today in the big scheme of things? Did you have a good day?
My day is a lot more boring than most people probably realize, to be truthfully honest with you. We do a lot of reading, a lot of reports, and a lot of chatting with players on whether it's Discord and the forums and stuff like that. But there's also stuff that goes on we can't talk about. We're planning events and stuff like that, or trying to prepare events that I can't necessarily talk about. So it was a good day, though. I mean, it's weird because in the grand scheme of things today, it's hard to remember what day it is. So it's like, it's.
Well, I'm glad you didn't forget our interview tonight. Today is Wednesday, by the way. Yeah. Today was Wednesday. I would not have forgotten. So Happa, what is it? Just starting right out of the chute, what is it that you've been working with World of Warships for a while now? Yeah. What is it that you want everyone to know about you? What's important to you that you want us to know?
Ooh, that's a rough one to answer. To be honest with you, one of the biggest things that got me wanting to be in this position was not a love necessarily for World of Warships, but a love for people. I love people. It's a love-hate relationship because people could be some of the most amazing things on the planet, but we could also be some of the hardest to get along with entities on the planet too, right? And for me, I mean, and you were a chief, you had every personality under the sun that you might have dealt with, and it was the same way for me, and it was a wonderful and tumultuous time at the same time. And when I left the Navy, I found that kind of had an area of my life missing, and I thought, well, this is, this could be something pretty cool if I got into it. So, and then here I am. So
yeah. Now, how long have you been with World of Warships Wargaming?
I started December 9th of last year. Of 2019. So a little over a year now.
Now, I'm going to ask you a very, very personal question. If you look at the difference between you and I, we are two different generations of naval chief petty officers.
What are you talking about? I heard you just had your 30th birthday recently.
Yeah, that's right. But I've got to ask, why do you wear your hats with a flat brim and not curved like they're supposed to be?
Oh, this is just the style of the time, my friend. This is so. Actually, it's funny that you asked that because when I was in the Navy, I used to curl the crap out of them. I used to just to the point where the brim of the hat would be on the edges of your eyeballs almost. And I had when I was young, because I'm a country boy. I grew up in the country. I grew up around country folks, and that's real normal. If you took your hat off when you went into a restaurant or whatever, you took the bill and you folded it in half, you stuck it in your back pocket. You know what I mean? And I remember specifically on my first ship, I was wearing my command ball cap. USS John Young command ball cap, and I was sitting down in the workshop and I was rolling that bill, and I had a chief walked up, and he had another command ball cap in his hand, and he smacked the hat off my head, and he put the new one on my head, and he said, "You don't curl your bill like that. That's what's the word? That's faddish. We don't do that." And that stuck with me for a very long time because he scared the piss out of me. and I was like, all right, well, the rest of the time I was on board that ship, I never curled a bill. And unfortunately, since then, it just kind of stuck. And
wow.
I was lucky because the style of hats nowadays, people wear them, flattened out. And every now and then, though, I do have a couple hats. Matter of fact, like this one right here is a hat that has the patch that I wore on me when I was in Iraq, and you could see that bill is proper curled. So
yeah. When I was in the Navy, we had just the opposite experience. The chief would make you curl your hat.
See, that's nuts to me how that changes over time. Like,
yeah, it does. It is very crazy. So. When did you get in the Navy originally?
So I came home. It was in the summer between my junior and senior year in high school. And you were maybe you were in the Navy at this time. This was in 97.
I was already retired.
Oh, Lord.
I was retired in 93.
And my dad was still active duty at the time. And my dad, I told my dad, I said, I know what I want to do when I get out of high school. And my mom peeked her head out of the kitchen because first of all, when I told everyone in my family made sense. They said it made sense because the personality I had at the time. My dad did one of those, okay, like whatever, whatever. He was a Navy chief too, so for him it was just like whatever. Mom did her, "Are you sure?" And then she asked me, "Are you sure?" for like the next 7 or 8 days, every day. And then I left for Great Mistakes, Illinois in summer of 98 is when I left for boot camp. So, yeah. And then 21 years later, well, decided it was time to go.
There you go.
So,
what was boot camp like for you?
It was hell at the time because that was literally the first time I'd ever left home on my own. I hadn't even ever been on an airplane up to that point. So, it was a huge whole new experience for me. Some 18-year-old kid getting yelled at for not folding a t-shirt right or a towel right or standing properly or whatever you could imagine under the sun. It was earth-shattering, culturally. I had to get reprogrammed. I mean, you go from being a kid that's sleeping all day long during the summertime after school to you're getting up before the sun's up, you know what I mean? So, but it was good. It was really good because, when I came home, my friends weren't really doing anything and I was already earning, an honest wage and learning a trade because I was a fire controlman. So I was learning electronics and everything. And, because I knew college wasn't for me at the time. I wasn't wanting to do anything with college related. I needed to travel. I needed to get out and see the world. I remember specifically though, my RDC at the time, MM1 Lance, I'll never forget him. He looked through our files one day, called me in the office, and I walked in and he stood me at attention. And he said, "So you went to Park Rose High School, huh?" And, yes, MM1. He said, "I went to Reynolds, which was our rival high school for back home in Oregon." And I was like, "Oh, of course it broke me from my military bearing." I was like, "Oh, really?" And he looked me in the face and yelled a couple expletives in my face and basically was like, "Don't think for one moment we're going to be friends just because we're from the same town," or something like that. But I never will forget that. Like, he went through, at that time, it was a huge impact to think that I had a room full of 100 other sailors and he took the time to read everybody's record to get to know his sailors, even though we were only going to be together for, not even 3 months. I thought that was like my first leading into what leadership really was. You know what I mean? Like, that really blew my mind. So it was good though. It taught me how to be an adult.
Yeah, I gotcha. And that's funny. I had a totally different experience going through boot camp. When I was headed for boot camp, I was 24 years old, married, and already had my first child. So I was 24 years old at night in a bunk in boot camp in Orlando, crying myself to sleep at 24 years old. That was a culture change for me, big time. Papa, we've got a question here from Cliff Walker in chat. Yeah. Cliff Walker said he was in the Navy went to boot camp about the same time you did, and was wondering if you remembered what unit you were in boot camp.
I was in 944, Division 944 in boot camp. We were rifle squad, and I was, believe it or not, at 5'8", I was the shortest individual in my division, and I was the guidon. Because at that time, the 900 divisions, they tried to select, well, for the rifle squad anyway, they tried to select taller individuals. Because essentially for the color guard for the military, you had to meet a certain height requirement, which I didn't meet at the time. They just needed somebody short to be the guidon, I guess. So, yeah.
You know what's funny about that is I was in the rifle squad as well, the rifle drill team as well. That's weird.
Okay. Yeah.
In boot camp.
I remember a lot of those. I was lucky. I felt significantly lucky because those guys having to lug that rifle around all day long, I could only imagine. And here I was carrying a flag, just a flagpole. That's it. That's all I carried, So I felt for those guys sometimes on the hot, because I was there during the summertime. So Great Lakes in the summer is not a pleasant place to be, which I can imagine Orlando is not pleasant in the summer either, but yeah.
Yeah, that was there in the summer. But we only carried the rifles, the ceremonial rifles, when we were practicing or doing a drill event at a graduation.
Oh man, yeah, no, the guys that I was with, those guys always, they always had the rifles, no matter where, mess hall, everything, always had them. It was nuts.
I just realized that Rita Gamer is in here, and Rita Gamer too. I don't know if you guys know who Rita is, but Rita is the other half of the team for the Mighty Jingles.
Yeah.
Yeah, Rita, good to have you here. Thank you. Thanks for being here. Let's see. What else have I got here? We're done, Happa. I got no more questions. No, I'm kidding.
Okay, cool. Let's get
Yeah, let's go out and have a beer. Okay, so you went to boot camp in, did you say 98?
Yes.
Yes, boot camp in 98. You left boot camp, you probably went to BEE school, basic electronics and electricity school or whatever, right?
Yep.
And then you went to C school for your fire control.
Yep.
And then you went to your first ship.
Yep.
Which was the Johnson, did you say?
USS John Young.
John Young. Well, it was close.
DD 973. She's off the coast of San Diego being a reef right now.
Uh-oh.
They used her for naval gunfire testing. It was a sad day. I actually had friends that sent me the videos and stuff. I was actually on deployment on my next ship when they did that. So
wow, that was crazy. That's crazy. Yeah, it's good that it made a reef instead of razor blades. You know, it's
totally
that,
yeah.
And I don't know about you, but I'm a diver. I would love to go diving on some of those, you know, reefs that they planted like that.
I'll tell you, that's one of the things I actually regret. I was in San Diego for a total of 14 years in my career, and I never once made the trip out to scuba dive out to her, and I always intended to. And I just never got around to it. And it was just one of those things. I was always deployed or always doing, you know, the important things sometimes you just forget to do, unfortunately. But yeah, she's off there being a reef. I'm much happy that she's a reef and not razor blades, like you said.
Yep.
So.
Well, my second ship that I was on, the Leyte Gulf, I was a chief on that ship, and we actually had a dive club. We brought all our scuba gear to, you know, on board and kept it. And then when we went to different ports, we got to go diving all over the world. It's amazing. So
that's awesome. Yeah, my second ship was the Lake Champlain. So I remember at the time, I mean, I was a third class at the time, but I remember we went to Australia and we had a group on board that did the same thing. And I just never, it's going to sound weird, but I have small ears. So diving for me becomes painful because I can't get them to pop. But I used to snorkel a lot when we were in Australia, the couple of ports. I snorkeled mostly because it was just so painful for me to scuba dive. But
Bobcat asked, were you on a DD?
The John Young was DD 973. That was I'm trying to remember. I want to say the Arleigh Burks only had about maybe 20 of them active in the late 90s, something like that. But yeah, she was a Spruance class destroyer that they had removed the two-armed bandits. So the two-armed bandits are a missile launcher. You had two arms that could shoot two missiles. And she was the test bed for vertical launch system. And they essentially, she was the first ship to ever get it. They pulled her into dry dock. They cut giant holes in her front end and aft end. And they put these, vertical launch systems in, put her back in the water, floated her in the water. Engineers recognized that there were cracks forming just aft of the VLS tubes forward and forward of the aft VLS tubes aft. And they said, oh, the hole's not strong enough to hold the weight. They pulled her back into dry dock and shored her up. And after that, then they started pumping out all the sprue cans went into dry dock, and they put VLS in all of them. So yeah.
So
old ship, very old ship.
Did you, are you a pollywog?
Oh, no, sir. I'm a golden shellback.
Are you really? I'm a pollywog. I never did cross the equator.
Really?
No way.
Were you East Coast sailor?
Yeah.
That's why. Okay.
But
Yeah,
I came.
I was lucky in Lake Champlain. We crossed the both at the exact same time, actually.
Now, the first ship I was on was the William V. Pratt DDG 44, and it did a Unitas cruise. And for you folks that don't know what a Unitas is, you circumnavigate South America, and they went down the east side of South America and came up the west side.
Right.
And when they went down the east side, of course, they crossed the equator. And when they came up the west side, they crossed the equator, and then they went through the Panama Canal. I reported aboard on the west side of the Panama Canal. I missed it all. And then it was just like, welcome aboard. We'll be home in 3 weeks. We're going to have barbecues on the fantail. And, by the way, let's do a sightseeing trip through the Panama Canal. But I never
that was one
did.
Thing I wish I could have done.
I only did that one time, but it was something to remember. Now, conversely, have you crossed the Arctic Circle, the Order of the Blue Nose? Now, see, I've done that 3 times.
In the North Atlantic.
Yeah.
So that was common for the East Coast. So when I was on the Baton, she was out of Norfolk, but I checked on board her September 7th, 2001. So you can imagine we didn't go anywhere but straight across the Atlantic the entire time I was on board her because of September 11th. So, but I mean, what was it? You went up and across. Where did you go? Greenland, Iceland?
Up around it was always NATO operations. We were doing some big exercise for NATO all 3 times. We ended up going to, we were in England. We went through there and did all kinds of stuff. Ended up going to Norway, doing a couple ports of call.
Oh, man.
A lot of times we didn't even go to port, though. I want to say it was only on one trip we actually got port calls. The other 2 times it was just go do your stuff and come home kind of thing. It was kind of boring.
Right.
But yeah,
that sucks. That's too bad.
Bobcat was asking about what position on the DD. I think you were a fire controlman, right?
Yeah, I was a fire controlman. I started my career out. Well, I didn't change for the most part until the last few years, but I joined the Navy as a fire controlman. No, I take that back. I joined the Navy to be an air crew rescue swimmer originally. Man, I forgot about all that. But I'm flat-footed. So swimming a lot is painful for me because you have to point your legs out, right? And it became a problem for me in boot camp when I would get a lot of the training. So they reclassed me when I was in boot camp as a fire controlman. But yeah, so I went to the John Young as a quad 0, so no NEC, just a random fire controlman. And I worked on all kinds of systems with those guys there. But in between the John Young and the Lake Champlain, they sent me to CWIS Sea School. So I worked on CWIS, Close-In Weapon System, which is a 20 millimeter Gatling gun system. It was a Gatling gun system that has its own radar, search and track radar. It's a totally standalone weapon system, literally the last line of defense for a ship. And then I worked on that for all but my last 4 years in the Navy. I worked on CWIS. The last 4 years in the Navy, as a chief, I worked on all kinds of stuff.
Now, of course, that whole last line of defense thing, that's a little far-fetched, don't you think, when you're talking to an EW that does jamming and launches chaff and that? No, I'm kidding.
No, so actually, I like that you mentioned that because I was one of the few fire controlmen that actually mentioned the fact because, so those of you that don't know, between EWs and fire controlmen, there's always this, it's a friendly, angst or friendly banter, how much more important are you, right? But I was one of the few people that used to say, look, man, I'm a CWIS tech. If my system is shooting at something, you should already be heading for your life raft at that
That's
point.
true. That's true.
It's not a good thing is going on. That means everybody else has run out of whatever they have to defend the ship with. My system is attempting to just hold everything else back. But yes.
Now,
yes, Pops, you are correct.
I do want to answer Rita Gaming's question of me. She asked if I had ever stopped in Portsmouth. And the answer to that is yes, one time. And I took a Liberty call and took 3 days off, went up and spent 3 days in a bed and breakfast up in London and did genealogical research. My family comes from that area. And I don't know, I'm sure Rita knows, Trafalgar Square. There's a church there called St. Martin's in the Fields. And my ancestry moved to New Brunswick, Canada, and settled in the Shediac area. And the first thing they did was built a church named St. Martin's in the Woods. And it's still there today. Anyway, sorry. Got sidetracked with that one.
I like hearing about that stuff. That stuff always interesting.
Yeah. When did you make Chief, Appa? How long did it take you to make Chief?
I was a late bloomer. For those of you watching that know anything about the military, I was a third class twice. I was a second class twice.
Oh my gosh.
Career. So I did the up down game. I made third class, picked up second class. I was awarded third class again, and then was selected to second class again. And then unfortunately, after that, the advancement to Chief Petty Officer was pretty tight for a very long time. So I was a first class Petty Officer for almost 7 years. So that was the thing I try to tell people is like, it actually made me a better leader. Believe it or not, going to MAST made me a better leader because I learned, how I didn't want to lead, because when I went to MAST the second time, I should have never went to MAST, and that's a whole nother story. But it taught me how to take care of my sailors a little bit better, and it was one of those "it won't happen to one of my sailors" kind of thing. But I was in Newport, Rhode Island, and I was teaching at the Surface Warfare Officer School. And it's kind of funny that a fire controlman would say this, because fire controlmen we're supposed to be on ships, right? We're supposed to be at sea. But Surface Warfare Officer School was the best command I had ever been at ever. It was easily the greatest command. I had the most ability to influence the most amount of sailors, because every single officer that ever got commissioned came through Surface Warfare Officer School. And as a first class, I was teaching them how to literally be an officer, how to run programs, how to do everything from our maintenance programs to driving a ship to fighting the ship to self-defense to, small arms weapons handling, which is what I specialized in when I was there. I was doing all of that. And I was, for a while, holding the position of a chief as a first class. So my commanding officer, I still to this day believe that I would never have made Chief Petty Officer if it wasn't for the commanding officer at the time when I was there. Because he wrote my eval to basically tell the board, you need to make him a chief like right now. And that eval, I didn't make it the next cycle because of the timing. But the following, out of 162 fire controlman chiefs, I was number 3.
Wow.
So, he's the reason I made Chief Petty Officer. But I was a late bloomer. It was at almost 16 years in the Navy when I was selected Chief Petty. I had friends that were Master Chiefs by the time that I got selected to be a chief. So, and for those of you that don't know, it goes Chief, Senior Chief, Master Chief. So that Master Chief's the highest rank you can go in the Navy. So I had friends that I had gone to boot camp or my early years of classes with that had literally maxed out in the Navy before I was even up for chief. So, but yeah.
So all those all those crappy officers we get out in the fleet, we can blame you
100%.
for. Yeah. Blame Happa.
100%.
Yeah. Awesome. Tell us how, where were you when you made chief, and tell us a little bit about your chief petty officer indoctrination stuff.
I was in a classroom full of 100-ish lieutenants, so O3s, and I was teaching, I don't remember what I was teaching. But at Surface Warfare Officer School, the commanding officer never came over the 1MC, which was the loudspeaker. He never did that. And he did the old school. Now hear this, now hear this. The following individuals lay to the commanding officer's office. And all of us just kind of stopped like, what is going on? And it was the way he worded it was FCC select this, FCC select that, OSC select this. So he read them all off. And you know, when you're a first class, I was expecting to be a first class to retirement. I expected to retire I didn't think I would ever get selected to be a chief because of my hiccups. And when he said chief, so you know, FCC select Wallachy, which was my last name, it did register. Like, it literally did register in my brain that he had said my name. And a couple of lieutenants in front of me looked at me and was like, "Congratulations, chief." I was like, what? Like, what just happened? Like, like, you know, but yeah, it was, it was a rare thing because I've already, I know it's not humble to say that I'm humble, but I'm already somebody that has the mantra of work hard, stay humble. Like, that's kind of been my slogan for years. Like, I'm human. I'm not perfect. I'm gonna make mistakes. I can admit my mistakes. And that's what and you remember that whole transition is meant to remind you that you didn't get to that position by yourself on your own laurels. You're not, you know, you're not perfect. You're not so on and so forth, to kind of humble you, break you down, build you back up. And I made a lot of chiefs angry throughout that time frame because they didn't really need to teach me that. But I will tell you this. So my dad was a chief petty officer. And I remember when I transferred from the USS Boxer out of San Diego to Surface Warfare Officer School in Rhode Island, I was really disappointed that I got orders to the East Coast. Because at that point, I had done 9 deployments in the Navy. I had been at sea for 13 years and did 9 deployments. So the average sailor doesn't do that many deployments. That's not normal. But September 11th happened, you know, the surge to Afghanistan and Iraq happened and all that stuff. I spent a year in Iraq on top of that. So, and only one of those deployments had been 6 months long. The rest of them had been 8 and 9 months long.
Wow.
So I had not been home. Like, it was not uncommon for me to not be home for years. So when I transferred from the USS Boxer and I went to Surface Warfare Officer School, I took leave, of course, and I went home. And I was spending time with my mom and dad and, you know, stuff. And my dad, I remember I was on the couch, you know, playing with the dog or whatever. And my dad yelled at me from across the house, which, you know, when dad yells at you from across the house, you go. And I walked into his bedroom and he had pulled out a bunch of just stuff, like old stuff. And he did the chief handshake, or the, you know, I'm sure you understand the chief handshake. He had stuff in his hand. And he shook my hand and he said, you know, I've been very proud of you and your naval career and so on and so forth. And in his hand were the chief's anchors that he was pinned with as a chief when he made chief. And I remember at the time telling Dad, my dad, I was like, Dad, you don't give me these. Like, I'm not going to get selected to be a chief. I'd 15 years in the Navy, I'm not going to get selected to be a chief. There's no chance. And he looked me dead in the eyes and he cursed, which my dad never cursed. He was a very rare sailor. My dad did not curse. And he cursed at me and he said, take these anchors, you're going to use them. And, the few times I ever looked my dad in the eye, I said, aye, chief, and I took those anchors. But so you went through the whole process, but I remember during the process, I had really made this Master Chief angry because he just couldn't break me, and that was like their goal, was to break you down to build you back up. And I remember halfway through the whole process, I'm not gonna lie, I started crying. He's like just unloading on me. I started crying, and he was like, "Why are you crying? Why are you crying in front of me, Chief Select?" And I told him, I was like, because I told my father that I will do everything I can to attempt to become a Chief Petty Officer by the time I retired. And they go through, there's a part of the Chief's process where you give them the anchors you're going to be pinned with, and then you have to find them, right? And we were at the Massachusetts Museum, the USS Massachusetts Museum. And we stayed a night on board the USS Joseph P. Kennedy, which is a Gearing class destroyer right across from the Massachusetts. And we did like a weekend or week of preservation on the Massachusetts. So we painted her, did needle gunning, so on and so forth, as part of our training. And that Master Chief, when I told him that, I told my dad I was gonna try my hardest to become a Chief Petty Officer, and he was like, well, why is that a big deal? But none of them had known that my dad was a Chief Petty Officer before. None of them knew any of the backstory, anything like that. And I just, vomited everything out. What happened with me at Captain's Mast. I was a second class twice, third class twice. My dad was a chief. It was devastating to me that I got busted down. I didn't ever think I would da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And I remember the Master Chief looking me dead in the eye, and he knew who had both my anchors. And he looked at both the chiefs and said, "Gimme." And he handed me both those anchors, and he said, "We should have never taken your father's anchors from you." He's like, "And here you go. Here's your anchors." And I remember you're a grown man, but I was just bawling my eyes out at the time, because that was, if you're in the Navy, becoming a Chief Petty Officer is the rank, you aspire to be if you're a career person.
Enlisted.
Enlisted, yes,
Yeah.
enlisted. And I remember still to this day, like that Master Chief's face when I had told him everything, because he just went blank. Like I just armed him, essentially. That was my humbling moment for the entire Chiefs thing. And unfortunately, due to health issues, my dad couldn't make it to Chiefs pinning. So they learned everything about my dad at the time, the health issues, all that stuff. So they didn't intend to live stream the Chiefs pinning for Surface Warfare Officer School. They live streamed it on the internet, saved it as a VOD and everything. And so my parents were able to watch it. It was like, that was it was humbling to me in my first experience of the Chiefs mess coming together to help me. You know what I mean? Because if you're a Chief Petty Officer, right, the mess is there for each other. That's what it's meant. It's a brotherhood, essentially. So, but yeah, sorry, I rambled there, but yeah.
Well, and that's perfectly fine. What a lot of people that have never been in the Navy understand is the becoming a Chief Petty Officer is probably the highlight of your career in the military. There
Completely.
is nothing like it in any other military branch in the world than there is in becoming a Chief Petty Officer. And I can say that because I went through it.
Of course,
and
yeah.
it's I didn't have those setbacks that you had, though.
Well,
That concerns me a little bit. And you're a community manager at Wargaming, huh?
It's good. It makes you. It reminds you that I'm human.
So Yeah, when I made chief, they were I was at a schools command, the Electronic Warfare School in Pensacola, Florida,
Okay.
and there were 82 of us that made chief at the same time on that cycle.
So that's a huge command then.
Yeah. Oh, it's huge. Yeah. It's not anymore, but the rating doesn't even exist anymore. But there was 82 of us that went through that initiation together. It was absolutely insane. But anyway,
I think we had 126 because all of us, it wasn't just Surface Warfare Officer School, all the chiefs for Naval Station Newport, Chief Selects rather, were together. So it was, I don't know, 16 commands or something like that. You know what I mean? So.
Yep. Awesome. So is there any, besides being a chief, making chief, and Bobcat, to answer your question, no, I made chief in 1985.
It has a lot of space.
1985, I made chief.
I was then.
Probably 6 months old. I don't know. I don't know. You must have been 10. What were you?
You have to really trust yourself.
6 years old? I was 6 years old.
Ah, that was
Nobody
close.
asked Rita how old she was. We don't need to get into that.
Yeah, definitely. But besides the Chief Petty Officer thing,
To not fill it up with something clever.
oh, to heck with it. I'm gonna get right to the question. What did you do that got you busted?
So the first time I went to mast, I shouldn't have gone to mast. I found out
Wait a
while I
minute.
was
Wait a
on
minute. Wait a minute. Wait a
Yeah.
minute. You do not have to answer that question, okay?
No, I have no problem.
Okay.
I have no problem. So that was something else that I learned, Pops, when I went through this process. Is I also told myself if a sailor ever asked me, I would 100% tell him, because I didn't do anything that I should have felt I should have been ashamed of, ever.
Be like, here I am.
What happened to me when I went to mast the first time, I won't go into the details because there was legal ramifications that went down. But while I was on restriction, I found out I should have requested court-martial because I would have been found innocent, and the people that sent me to mast would have been handled at court-martial. But I found out too late to do anything. And it was handled, the entire case was handled incorrectly. I wasn't read my rights. I wasn't told what I could and couldn't do. So many things were done incorrectly. And that was my first learning experience. I was like, after that, I was like, no sailor that I ever worked for, if I can help it, will ever go to mast. Because in my opinion, when I was a leader in the Navy, I could take care of anything. I could teach a sailor how to not screw up ever again. And as a Chief Petty Officer, I'm sure that you knew what you could do if a sailor was screwing up to correct the action without sending them to mast. That was one of my goals when I was a Chief Petty Officer. I would make sure I sat in on every disciplinary review board for a sailor. And for those of you who don't know, the first step of the disciplinary process in the Navy is a DRB, Disciplinary Review Board. The chiefs would make the decision of whether a sailor would go up to see the old man or not and get in trouble. And my goal was any sailor that sat in a DRB in front of me, I would either A, make them cry, and it sounds horrible, but if you make a grown person cry because of something they did, typically they realize what they did wrong. And I don't need to go any further than that. So like case in point, I had a sailor that was extremely hungover and didn't stand a proper watch. It was an armed watch. It was a security watch. I was the anti-terrorism force protection officer. I made that sailor cry because that's how people die. You didn't stand a proper watch. So we didn't need to go any further than that. He understood, So that was the first time. The second time, I had a leader that, for whatever reason, was hell-bent on not allowing me to make Chief Petty Officer. And what saved me, because I got a full suspended bust. They busted me because the commanding officer was just not about giving breaks. If you went up to him, you were getting busted. But he suspended everything because he had said in front of other sailors, I am going to do this to ensure that you never make Chief Petty Officer. And that was his own reasoning behind doing what he did. And the CMC and the XO both called him out for it. My first evaluation after that bust was an early promote, an EP, which is a top eval you can get. Because I was already running at the position of the next rank up anyway, which, by the way, as a third class, I did. I was always in positions to be that you're supposed to be a second class. As a second class, I was always in positions as a first class. And as a first class, I was always in positions as a chief. Always. I got lucky-ish in that, but yeah. So, but yeah, I took all those as learning experiences. They always just, going through those processes made me a better leader in general. So
that's cool. Thanks for sharing. That's awesome. That's awesome. When you got out of the Navy, what was wargaming your first civilian job, or was there something else in there doing? Did you work at McDonald's passing out hamburgers, or what would you do?
So by the time that I was getting ready to retire, I had done 10 deployments. Only one of them was 6 months long. The rest were 8 or 9 months long. I had spent a year in Iraq. I had essentially deployed to the point of divorce. I had missed, anniversaries, birthdays, and family passing. So my goal was to do as little as humanly possible, set myself up to be debt-free. That was the first goal. Set myself up in a place where I wanted to live, where I didn't have to worry about living from day to day. And I wanted to put myself in a position where I could literally do whatever I wanted. And I had taken college courses here and there while I was active duty, but you can, I know, to get a degree while you're active is, come on, you're already working crazy hours. So my goal was I was going to be a full-time student, period. So the day I walked off the ship, I remember I turned to the CMC who was shaking my hand. I said, my plan is I'm not going to get a haircut for an entire 12 months, 365 days. I'm not shaving for 365 days. And I'm going to go be a student. That was going to go be a full-time student. My goal was to get a degree in human resource management and try to go work for the VA to do job placement for veterans. That's what I wanted to do. So where does one go to move? I'm from Oregon. I grew up in Oregon. The cost of living in Oregon has been going up steadily over the years. I was like, I can't afford to live off my retirement in Oregon. And I looked around at states, just random states, because that's the great thing about being in the military, right? Once you leave, you can go literally anywhere. I don't care who you are. Anytime in the military you leave, you can do anything. You can do any job. It doesn't matter. So I looked at Arkansas, I looked at West Virginia, I looked at Montana, which, by the way, I fell in love with. Montana is gorgeous, but I just didn't have enough money saved up to buy land there and stuff like that. And then I saw Texas, and I started in all these states. I looked at the veterans benefits, the state veterans benefits, and Texas just had the best state benefits. And I went to Southeast Texas because I heard Southeast Texas was booming. The oil business was booming there. A lot of growth, houses really cheap, so on and so forth. Started going to school there, and I was having a blast. I was kind of blown away by the complaining. Some of my fellow classmates who were, a little younger than I, about the assignments that you had to do and stuff like that. And I don't know if he's still watching, but Dewey 96 is someone I know from a community that I ran before wargaming called Dad's Hideout. And I was in class watching the professor's lecture, and I got a PM from him, and he said, you need to submit your resume to this. And I was an alpha tester for tanks. I was an alpha tester for warships. I was an alpha tester for warplanes. Just a player, no big deal. And I click on the thing, and it brought up wargaming.com/careers. And I was like, what? So I'm reading through community manager. It was a community manager position. And I responded to it, I was like, what the hell do I know about the video game industry, man, other than playing games? I don't know anything about that, you know? And up to that point, I had been on the board of directors or managing Dad's Hideout for a better part of a decade. And Dad's Hideout is not just like a gaming group. It's a group for dads. It's essentially a site for dads. Dad's Hideout, literally. All walks of life, all over the world. You know, I'd been managing these. I managed get-togethers. I coordinated, you know, gaming groups and tanks and warships and warplanes and various other games. And he was like, just submit your resume. I'm like, again, what do I know about? I don't know anything about the video game industry. I was like, I'll think about it. About maybe an hour later, somebody else from Dad's Hideout, who actually manages Dad's Hideout today, said, are you going to submit your resume for that position that Dewey sent you? And I'm like, what? Y'all are like teaming up on me. What's going on? You know? And I had a conversation with Dewey, and I had a conversation with Dakar at the time, screen names I'm using, of course. And I told him, I was like, I don't know anything about this. He's like, man, you've been managing our community for years. Just stick your resume in and see what happens. I was like, so I begrudgingly pulled my resume up, and I'm not gonna lie, I didn't spend a whole lot of time on it. I'd thrown in all my numbers, managing, and, you know, stuff I did in the Navy, and updated my resume because I didn't expect to need a resume, right? I was going to be a student. And I went on to LinkedIn, and I did the same thing on LinkedIn and submitted my resume. I thought, okay, fine, fine. I submitted my resume. Are you guys happy? And a couple weeks later, I got a email. It was like, whoa, wait, what? You guys want to talk to me? What? Like, what's going on?
Awesome.
And a couple weeks later, I started doing interviews, and here I am. I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm not gonna lie. I still have no clue.
Yeah, you do, and you're doing such a terrible job at it too. I'll tell you. Listen, I want to share two things before we run out of time here. I want to share two things. I'm wearing a shirt, ball cap from the U.S. Fleet Forces, and I actually have a challenge coin that goes with this. One of our viewers, Miggs, sent me all three items. He's active duty on the East Coast, sent me the shirt, the ball cap, and the challenge coin. And
Miggs has been holding out for me.
and just to share with you, another viewer, SWO, SWO, which you know what that means,
Sure.
just sent me this huge challenge coin, and I want to show you guys the difference in the size here.
Oh, good Lord.
Yeah, this is a typical challenge coin that I've seen all through my career. This thing's like a shield, right? And it's got the back. And guys, it's beautiful. It's got chain around the outside.
Yeah.
Now this one says USS Wisconsin BB-64 Forward for Freedom, because SWO was the SWO on the Wisconsin, and he sent that to me.
Wow.
And I think I am the first one to receive one of these. They're fresh.
Yeah.
He just had these made up. So that's being
huge.
said, Papa, do you have any memorabilia you'd like to share with everybody?
I have a couple, if you don't mind.
Let's do show and tell.
The first one was, it's a coin that it means a lot, because if you're a Chief Petty Officer, you know that you have a large amount of responsibility and accountability as a chief, right? and I was lucky enough to meet the Command Master Chief for, and I don't even know if it'll show up on the camera or not, but the Command Master Chief for the USS Chief, which it doesn't show up that well. Let me see if I can turn the lighting down. Maybe it'll come up a little better here. But the USS Chief is a minesweeper, MCM 14, and it's the only ship to ever be named for a rank in the U.S. Navy, and that's USS Chief. And let me tell you, that ship is beautiful. The amount of woodwork and everything they've got on board that ship. So this one was one I held onto for the entirety of my naval career as a chief. But the one that I covet the most, and it's because this stuff happened while I was forward deployed in Iraq, is this coin. And this is the same thing here, Pops. So you got size comparison, these two coins. This one it looks like a Spartan shield, but this is the command coin for the USS Murphy. And for those of you that don't know, the USS Murphy is named after Michael Murphy, who unfortunately was a Navy SEAL that died in the line of duty in Afghanistan. And that's the what's the heck is the name of the movie? Somebody in chat will get it, but there was a movie made essentially where the lieutenant Michael Murphy made a call for help because his SEALs were vastly outnumbered by Taliban, and almost the entire team passed away in combat. And Michael Murphy died as a result of him making that call. Survivor, that's the movie. Yeah, no, not Survivor. Lone Survivor. That's it. Lone Survivor.
There you go.
And Marcus Luttrell was the only one to survive of that SEAL team. But I on board that ship, they have something that I love about U.S. Navy ships when they're named for people. They tend to have a little memoriam somewhere on the ship, and the one for the Michael Murphy is. I don't know if it's just because it's during my time in the Navy or whatever, but it hits a little harder because the pictures are more new, and and he passed away. But that one is another one that I carried with me for a long time. And I have a whole slew of coins, but the other one. So I told you I was stationed in Naval Station Newport, right, at Surface Warfare Officer School when I got selected to be a chief. Part of the chief process or becoming a chief was going up to the USS Constitution, and we spent time on board the USS Constitution, which is the oldest commissioned naval vessel in the United States Navy, right? Sailing vessel, old Ironsides. And at the time, they had pulled her out of the water, and they were replacing the copper plating under the belly of the ship. And the copper plating is to protect the wood, is what they do. And when they pull the copper plating out, what they do is they punch points from that copper plating. So one of the things I got from the CMC from the USS Constitution, and again, the lighting's probably crappy, I'm sorry for that, but is a copper coin. I don't know if that comes up clearer or not.
It's not bad.
Let's see if it'll focus. Punched from the copper of the belly of the USS Constitution. So that was another thing that I came away with. And when we were leaving, they were literally taking the live oak from the Constitution, and they were just throwing it in a dumpster because she's made of live oak, which is a specific type of wood here in the United States. And it's protected by the federal government because of the fact that there's only a few, orchards of it left. But that wood they told us, you're not allowed to take that wood because it's protected. But we're like, well, you're throwing it out. Don't know, you're not allowed to touch it. So I'm not saying that some of that wood may have disappeared from the dumpsters because of some chief selects that probably were up to no good, but there was some coin holders that were made from the wood from the Constitution. And then I have a bunch of just random coins in here also, but some things that really hit home for me. I was on board the USS Boxer for almost 7 years, That's not normal. Normal tour for fire control and his max is 5. I was involuntarily extended twice on board the USS Boxer, and when the commanding officer for the Boxer found out I'd been on board her for almost 7 years, he actually called me to his stateroom. I was a first class at the time. Again, usually if you hear your name called over the 1MC on a ship, it's not the greatest thing in the world, and especially when it's the commanding officer calling your name, and he called my name to his import cabin, and I thought I was getting ready to be a second class again. I thought I'd screwed something up. But he called me there because he wanted to give me this. And every commanding officer, again, there you go, has one of these, and they're the command coin for the commanding officer of a ship. And they only punch a certain amount of those because the commanding officer only is there for a little while. In the front, it has his name. But he wanted to give me that because he was like, you were stuck on board this ship for 7 years, so you deserve a little something.
Can you tell the viewers what the significance of a challenge coin is?
So it's changed a little bit because the culture has changed a little bit. But if you are somebody in the military and you go into, say, a base club or bar or a pub that has a lot of sailors typically in it, and you pull your challenge coin out and you don't present it, but you go up to the bar, the wood bar, and you tap the bar with your coin, usually pretty loudly, and most bars near a naval installation just typically will have a ship's bell, like pops usually rings when someone follows or subscribes to him. And what they do is everyone needs to pull their challenge coins out, and essentially, if you have the highest ranking coin in your pocket, then you pretty much drink for free the remainder of the night. I at one time in San Diego had this happen to me, and I just happened to have the USS Chief coin in my pocket, and there was a gentleman that had the commander of Fleet Forces Command actually coin in his pocket, who I believe was a 3 or a 4-star admiral at the time. And I made the argument that, I'm sorry, your 3 or 4-star admiral have a ship named after him? Because I'm pretty sure he doesn't. I do, and I'm a chief, so I'm pretty sure I win. And the bartender was a retired BMC, and he agreed with me, so I drank free the rest of the night. But yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Sweet. Well, while you were doing that, I pulled out 2 things.
Sure.
That I keep very close to me at my desk, and one of them is the actual chief anchors that I got pinned with during my chief initiation. So, of course, my dad was not in the military, so I had no one to really pass down anchors. But so they were new when I made chief, but I keep those handy. And the other thing that I got when I was in the Navy that I was very proud of was the ESWS pin, Enlisted Surface Warfare Specialist. And I bet you got one of those as well.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
But I would beg to believe that your ESWAS pin means more probably than mine does. Because when I got mine, they had made it a requirement that all E5 had to get their ESWAS in order to get promoted to E6.
Wow.
Whereas it was not uncommon on my first ship to see a first class or even a chief without their ESWAS pin because it wasn't a requirement to make rank at the time. So now, I mean, I hate to say it, it has been kind of not dumbed down, but kind of diluted a little bit and what the requirements kind of are. So,
yeah.
In case you guys don't know, the Enlisted Surface Warfare Officer, I'm saying my old command, the Enlisted Surface Warfare Specialist pin, you literally had to go around the ship and essentially learn a major portion of every job on the ship. you know. So as an EW, I imagine you learned how everything from anchor stations to minor ship handling to a little everything, right? Fire control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even how to drive the captain's gig.
Nice.
You know,
See, that's the fun stuff. I didn't get to do none of that when I was in.
Shooting the 50 caliber at 55-gallon drums off the fantail, you know, stuff like that, you know. Yeah, it was.
When I retired, I don't have the anchors I was pinned with. The anchors that my dad gave me, because I made the decision when I was getting ready to retire. Because I remember my dad's pinning. I was only like 7, 8 years old, but I remember my dad's pinning vividly. And when I heard that I was getting pinned, you know, it was a very emotional thing. And I remember when I was getting ready to retire, I was like, you know what? I can't just stick these in a drawer. I can't do that because these are my dad's. They still weren't mine. They were my dad's. And I went to the exchange, and there was a company there that did plaques and stuff. And I had taken my mother, bless her heart, being a sneaky little Japanese woman, dug through the photo albums that my dad had and snuck a photo out from his pinning that essentially matched the photo at my pinning. And I had those two photos put together on a plaque with my dad's anchors down below pinned into felt. And I had a little brass plate put in there that said, how did I word it? History of excellence, legacy of leadership. Because by the time my dad had retired, he was actually the commanding officer for a unit in the Reserve Center in Oregon. As a chief petty officer, he was a commanding officer. So he actually had the command pin and everything. And he had been through Vietnam and Desert Storm and so on and so forth. So when he retired, obviously, you know, he had a lot of captains and admirals and stuff at his retirement. I was just another chief retiring, you know what I mean? But I remember 2 times in my dad's entire life where he cried, and that was one when a relative passed away, and the second was when I surprised him because you know, when you retire, you do a speech. You talk to, you know, junior sailors, senior sailors, blah, blah, blah. And in the middle of it, I stopped what I was saying to tell a story about my dad. That story that I told you earlier about how he gave me his anchors, I never anticipated making chief. And as a chief, I could look back at a lot of the parenting my dad did and realize, holy crap, he was chiefing me when I was like 9 years old. Like, you know
awesome.
What I mean? but yeah, the second time was when he got presented with that plaque, and he was, you know, in his 50s, late 50s, and he's crying. And he cursed at me that time too. It's like a couple times in my life he's cursed at me, but yeah, that's supposedly hanging in the living room. But I was just like, you know, it's those things that you do, because like that's the type of stuff I can't, like, my dad's gonna, hopefully he'll cherish that for the many years he has left on the planet, hopefully. So
yeah. Now, do you see your dad much?
So that's it. That's the thing that sucks, right? Because this last year, I mean, you know, all the crap that's been going on. And they're in Oregon still. So when I made the decision to move to Texas, I felt horrible because I was retiring to come home, but I didn't come home, obviously. And I had intended to go home a lot more. And this past year, with them aging, it's not the best thing to travel to them because of the possibilities of, you know, COVID and things like that. So unfortunately, no. Now, that being said, I make it a point to call them every single Sunday and talk to my parents, because obviously I wasn't able to do that for years and years and years. But I think this past Christmas was probably the hardest for me, because I intended to go home and spend a few weeks there, you know, with them for Christmas and New Year's. But Mom and Dad, being military, you know, retirees themselves, they understand as well. They were like, well, no, we understand, you know, you're doing you. And I was like, well, yeah, but you know, when you're not in the military anymore, it's like, come on, man, you know, I want to go home. But so I'm hoping for the coming year, I'll go home and spend time with them. But
Awesome. Working for WOWs.
Yeah.
Has that been? I'm not quite sure how I want to word this. Tell us about your time with WOWs and wargaming and the people you met and what it's like to work with those people. That sounded strange. Those people.
You mean the players, or do you mean wargaming?
Wargaming. Your peers at wargaming.
I have to tell you, the employees at wargaming are some of the most misunderstood people that you'll come across ever. And I say that because unfortunately, a lot of the interaction you have as a community manager, typically the ones you remembered aren't the necessarily positive interactions. And the way that I tend to take a lot of that a bit more personal than I probably should. But I'll tell you, one of the things I have loved is the care and love that my coworkers put in to the positions that they have. It's farther reaching than most people realize. And whether that's something as innocuous as customer service, or dealing with, the content creation side of it, or the art department, or the development, like, people legitimately put far more hours in than I ever thought anybody would. And they'll go out of their way to attempt to make things right. Especially when it comes to interactions between the community and the staff itself. One of the greatest things that I've been able to experience has been our Anchors Away tour. I've had the luxury of experiencing it as a player, and I've had a luxury of experiencing it as a community manager. And I'll tell you, one of the most depressing things about this past year has been the fact that we've had to cancel so many AATs, because one of the things I loved the most about being a wargaming employee is walking onto a ship and meeting the players. Like, that to me, you can't beat that. I cannot beat that ever. Being on board Lexington, the Kid, the Hornet, the Texas. Yes, going to those ships is amazing, but for me, I'm gonna sound like an old salt, but like, you seen one ship, you've seen them all. You know what I mean? Like, but to be able to talk to the players, that to me is amazing. And when you can see the amount of work that goes on behind the scenes that nobody gets credit for, by the way, nobody gets credit for, over the course of months, to put out something as simple as a skin for a ship, or a horn sound effect, or a splash in the water, or the sun glare, or the sound effects. Like, the work that goes into that, people do not realize that. And the amount of work that those people do is just amazing to me. Like, as a player, I would have never imagined how much time goes into to try to get it right as well. That's the other thing, is the amount of work, rework, rework to get it right. And I remember getting asked the question, probably about a month or two after I started with wargaming. They said, what if you had an offer to do the exact same job with another video game publisher like EA or whatever? And I told them, I was like, I would have turned it down. What if they paid you a handsome amount of money? I would have turned it down. Like, I came into this position not because I needed it. It's because I wanted it. I wanted to do this. And wargaming specifically has not let me down. Like, they are an amazing company that cares far more than people give them credit for. And it just blows my mind. Like, the criticisms that occur honestly, to me, when I look at the interactions from someone like me in a different company towards the players, that doesn't occur. Like, just being able to go to events and talk to a player, recognize a screen name, recognize a face, whatever, that doesn't occur with other video game companies. It may occur with smaller ones, but not when you're talking in companies in player base the scale that you have with, say, World of Warships. It just doesn't happen. I had a person that I met on the USS Kidd. So USS Kidd was one of the last Anchors Away tour stops that we made. Don't remember the face because I'm horrible trying to remember that, kind of thing. But they had said, we talked about X, Y, and Z. I remembered them right away. And I still see them occasionally in battle. That to me is it's worth it. It makes it worth it. You know what I mean? So yeah, I wouldn't want to do this job for anybody else. And I don't think I ever will, to be honest with you. Like, I entered into this position with the reasoning of the fact that I love people, I love warships, and I love World of Warships. So here I am. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
Where do you think you'll be in 5 years?
hopefully throwing a stick out my front yard and letting the dog chase it. not really worried about a whole lot, Pops. You know what I mean? I mean, my original goal was to try to get a big chunk of land somewhere where I could, wander around out in the yard and do whatever the heck I want and not really have to worry about nothing. So, you know what I mean? Like, I couldn't answer that. Hopefully on some land, doing some gardening, being the old man that I feel like I am every day.
Well, I have a hobby here. I build elevated garden planters for old folks.
Well, you and I are gonna have
so
to
you
have
don't
a
have
little
to
chat,
bend
my
over.
friend.
Yeah. All right, we gotta call this. We could probably talk here all night, but there are two things I want to bring up before we close. One, I want you to try to explain what the Brotherhood of Chief Petty Officers
Oh, good Lord.
is about. Because I know I've gotten questions about it, wow, how come you and Happa had this relationship? And I tried to explain the Chief Petty Officer thing, and it's tough. How do you answer that?
So the only way that I could really or best explain it is to talk about another damn sea story, and I'm sorry. Sailor shows up on USS New Orleans, which was the command that I retired off of. Brand new chief. So the new sailor to the command, the chief that's there in charge of this individual is brand new, and a new chief herself. New sailor steps on board, and literally says, yesterday I found out my husband has been cheating on me. He's sold my car. He's emptied my bank accounts. He's done X, Y, and Z. I need help. Now, this new chief that had just checked on board had only been in the Navy for 9 years, so she was a very young chief too. She did it correctly. She didn't try to handle it on her own. She literally walked in the mess, she closed the door and said, help, I need help. That chief had been on board for 5 days. None of us knew her. We didn't know anything more than her name. And the 40 some of us that were on board that ship pulled together, came up with an action plan to take care of that sailor, get that sailor housing, take care of that sailor's bills for the next however many weeks, because I remember specifically that gentleman had essentially economically destroyed this poor girl, the poor kid. I call her kid, but she was 19 years old. Found a place for her to stay, got her covered for groceries because, oh, by the way, she had 2 kids that deadbeat wasn't trying to help take care of. got childcare for her because she was obviously in the Navy, still working, and then got all the instructions that new chief needed in order to help take care of this sailor. No questions asked. No, you need to get me back later. None of that. It has nothing to do with what a chief or being a chief is. That's literally what it means. As a chief petty officer, you walk into a group of chief petty officers and say, I need help. Those chiefs are going to jump and help. And it doesn't matter what it is. I've also seen retired chiefs in San Diego, specifically one of the last Pearl Harbor survivors. Now, unfortunately, this individual has passed away since, but this chief was going to lose their home because this chief was living off of their severance and had no family. The waterfront came together. So you're talking 32nd Street Naval Station, hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of chiefs came together, started a GoFundMe, and essentially dumped money into this fund for this World War II retired chief. Ended up paying off this gentleman's mortgage, paying for medical bills, and giving them an additional money. And I remember specifically that blew me away too, because you had chiefs they had families all these chiefs have families of their own, right? They got their own kids, they got their own wives, houses, mortgages, whatever, and they're all in Southern California, and all of them donated all that money straight to this chief. And that's one thing that I've always taken away, especially when I was nearing retirement. I tried to tell new chiefs, like, the biggest thing that you could take away is you need to humble yourself enough to ask for help when you need help. Because when it comes to chiefs, if you use the word help, it's like, I called it Captain Danuts, right? Because like chiefs just show up and they'll help take care of each other. It really is. And that's why anytime you hear me engage with another chief, and it's been that way at AATs, I would hear instantly someone be, hey, I'm a retired chief, or I'm an active duty. You're instantly my brother or my sister, because that's what you are. You're family at that point. You're legitimately family. And y'all don't know it, but Chief Pops and I have had conversations about it. I mean, even around Thanksgiving, you and I had talked about it. Like, we're chiefs. I never even met Pops before in person, but that doesn't matter. If he ever needs something from me, I mean, he's a retired chief. I'm going to help him out, and I would be remiss if I didn't think for one moment it wouldn't be the same way other way around. So,
yeah, well said. Well said. Well, in closing, Hapa, what else would you like to tell the community out here in closing? We'll let this be your closing statement, if you will.
I'll say the same thing I say. If any of you guys that watch my World of Warships streams, the official World of Warships streams, I try to close my streams with the same lines every time. And that's essentially, we hope that you take care of yourselves, you take care of each other, you have a good day, a good weekend, and at the end of the day, hopefully you realize that World of Warships is a game, and you're all playing a game with each other. And I am always available if people have questions on my Discord. There's so many ways you can get a hold of me if you have a question you want to ask. Discord, Twitter, Instagram, my Facebook, my Twitch channel, on the forums, whatever. And I may not get an answer right away for you, but I will attempt to get you an answer. And I am not in this position because I need it. I'm in this position because I wanted to be in it. People are my passion, and the World of Warships community overall is amazing. And if you don't believe it, look at the amount of charities and stuff that people like Pops partake in throughout the year. All of the, Save the Children, Veterans Associations, so on and so forth, globally. And your proof is there. I mean, the proof is there. The World of Warships community is unlike any other community, any other gaming community globally. And I have to tell you, even you misfits in DHO, I know some of you are watching. I appreciate every single one of you, and I would not be in this job if I didn't want to do it. So
Awesome. Thanks, Appa. And I do want to
course.
say in closing, I want to thank you personally for taking the time out of what I know is a busy, busy time for you,
of course,
and to share your background story and letting the community know a little bit more about what makes you tick as a person and as a retired chief petty officer. It's been awesome, guy, and I want to thank you very much for being here.
no, thank you for having me. Appreciate you.
And with that being said, guys, we're gonna do a real quick wrap up. And Hapa, if you could stand by, we'll finish. We'll close out with a private Discord
Of course.
little chat afterwards. Guys, this is Pops. This is Hapa. Two chief petty officer extraordinaires, generations apart, but we are the same. We come from the same stock, regardless of the difference in ages. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Guys, we got several new followers in. Ring that bell. That's right, guys. Ringing that bell for you guys. Thanks for the follows. Thanks for the biddies. Thanks for being here. And thanks for all the support. We'll see you again real soon. This is Pops, and he can't take
Type of fodder, sorry.
Awesome, dude. Somebody clip that, will you? Somebody clip that. All right, guys, we'll catch you all later. Hang on, let me do the bell. Appa fodder departing. There we go, guys. Catch you all later. Good night.